Welcome to the Dear Doc podcast, where we will discuss the business of running a dental practice with a panel of experts. Now, your host, Dr. Christopher Hoffpower.
All right.
Hey guys, this is Doc Hoffpower. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the Dear Doc podcast. Lewis over there showing off. He's drinking some Dewar's White Label. I've got a little bit of Glenfiddich over here. So we've got the showdown of the scotches while we're discussing a really cool new business model. Now, you guys know recently I've been doing this new mini series in the podcast that discusses different types of business models in dentistry. And Lewis, I think you've got a really cool handle on a small group practice model that actually kind of cross-pollinates with the specialist GP model. And so you tell me about your business, man. Actually, would you mind if I pull something up real quick? You guys had an article published really recently, didn't you, about you? And I believe it's Beam Street. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So guys, you see here, 3 young dentists in New York City, 2 of them orthodontists, taking a whole new approach to dental care, eliminating all but 3 procedures: cleaning, whitening, and straightening with Invisalign. And, you know, that was published not only in Forbes magazine, which, I mean, come on, Lewis, you're a baller, Forbes magazine, but it was published in several other magazines as well. Forbes was actually just the most reputable one that I found whenever I was looking through the different articles. And so you have your finger on something new. And I'll tell you, as I've been speaking to different dentists across the nation, I told you earlier, they were kind of doubtful, right? So I know something they don't know, which is that, what is your background, Lewis? All these dentists who doubt your business acumen. What's your background, Lewis?
I went to college at NYU with a degree in economics. I mean, I started off. When I was in high school, I loved economics as a concept, as a subject.
Are you saying it's possible that you may know more than the average dental graduate about business? I know you denied that earlier, but I think you're full of poop.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because, like, I don't think I know enough, but I feel like my mind is formatted to think like that. I love that. I love that. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
You know, there's an old saying.
Down to,
There's an old saying whenever it comes to martial arts, and someone was talking about the first black belts, and they said the first black belts were not. They were merely people who had a white belt because that's what we wore to hold our gi in place. And they practiced and they practiced and they practiced. And over the years, their belts became dingy gray and then brown and then finally black. And they wore the same belt every day, but they changed the gi out because the belt stayed in the dojo. And so their level of knowledge, it wasn't defined by the fact that they were practicing martial arts, but how much they had learned over their journey. And I think that's a very honest approach for you to say, hey, look, my mind is formatted in this way. I have had the training that allows me to accept business knowledge. It doesn't mean I'm a business genius, but I am perhaps more trained to accept business knowledge than the average dentist. I think that's a very humble approach to things.
I mean, it's definitely humbling more as you started actually do it versus to think about it, right?
No doubt, my friend.
I think when you think about it, it's just a concept, and it's easy to say that I can do it until you start it, and you're like, this is everything that I didn't think would happen. When I was an economics major, what we did, my favorite subject was microeconomics, and it was all about firms and how firms are, and calculating deadweight losses, profit margins, revenue, so on and so forth. Not like finance, but that was like my favorite subject, right? So I think consider dental business a micro form of microeconomics. And I'm trying to see if I could reinvigorate my passion for economics, or at least that kind of subject, into the dental field.
I got you. Okay, so as you're looking at getting out of dental school, and you got out of dental school when?
2016.
2016. So you're
Yeah.
really a recent grad. Okay, so before
Yeah.
creating this business model, where were you? What did you do?
I went to residency at GPR at Bronx, VA. I did 1 year. After my first year, I was actually pursuing a dental tech startup, which many people may know, Floss Bar. So I was initially a co-founder of Floss Bar, and I left in 2017 because I was so invested full-time in residency. I decided to do a second year of residency, but couldn't, kind of squeeze out time and carve out time to do startup plus residency. And then during my residency, I rented out a chair in New York City and started my own practice to see patients at night. And I started to teach at Columbia too. So on top of that, startup, full-time residency, start our own practice, teach at Columbia. There was not enough time.
So Louis, the funny thing is that I realize that I'm amongst my own now. I've been an entrepreneur for as long as I've lived. My first startup was in about the 6th grade, and I worked near this plant that dumped chemicals in ditches, and they caused mutations in clovers. And so what I would do is I would go out. Clover, as you know, probably is an indicator species. I would go and I'd cut off all the extra leaves until I got down to 4 leaves, and I would sell the 4-leaf clovers for $5 a piece to my classmates.
Nice.
Don't you wish you'd thought of that? Huh?
That's smart. Yeah.
So I have been an entrepreneur since about the 5th or 6th grade. My son opened his first business in the 4th grade.
Wow.
It's just, I think, the way that certain people think. And you obviously are an entrepreneur and a serial entrepreneur, just from what you've told me. So tell me, when you went into business with the 2 orthodontists, do they think the way that you think? Is it the economics background that made you think this way to start this program? Or is it the economics background that informed what you needed to do?
A little bit of both, right? So when I first started thinking about private practice or even dentistry, just committing myself to dentistry, it started with my internship where, I didn't have much dental work done. I didn't know much about dentistry, but what I did know was that people really, first thing I already knew when I was like 18, 19 was people that, wanted to care about how much it cost, and sometimes people say, what, the best treatment for them may not be the right treatment because they cannot afford it,
Right.
at least for them. So I committed myself when I was 19, when I was interning, and said, if I'm going to be a dentist, what I wanted to do is make sure that on a personal level, before, all this happened, was I want to have a practice or a few practices that can, be boutique, lower cost to increase the volume, and also be able to, give people the smile that they deserve. Very noble, right? And it's, it's something that most people would say, hey, it's not going to happen.
Right.
So this is around almost back before big corporate group practices came about. That was kind of something I was thinking about already. And fast forward to now, it was always something that I wanted to do. I mean, one of my partners, he believed in that, and we were in alignment, and that's a similar core value that we have and principle.
So you have 2 partners, and you said that you're in alignment with at least one of them. But do they understand, or did they initially understand your vision whenever it comes to the actual business model? And what is your business model? I know what it is because I've read the article and you and I have talked a little bit, but most of the dentists out there are not going to understand your business model, and they're going to really freak out when they hear what it is.
So the business, my partners do agree with business model. I think that each of them had agreed that we can do this at a risk, as a calculated risk. The business model is that we have 3 services that we provide. There are clear aligners, whitening, and hygiene prevention. And what we believed was that clear aligners, having clear aligned teeth and having healthy teeth and clean teeth are hand in hand. It's like a marriage. You can't have, malpositioned teeth or malaligned teeth and have good hygiene. Just, naturally, as they have a practice, sometimes it's always good for hygienists to say, hey, would you ever consider clear aligners? And that's kind of how it blossomed. And we're in New York City, and because we're in New York City, our geography allows for that model, because we just have a huge turnover of patients and people and influx of people, because New York City is like the mecca for everything.
Right. So are you, when you guys are looking at this, well, first of all, talking about your model, obviously you provide 3 services, which really probably is more on the lines of like 8 to 10 services. When you look at orthodontics, limited orthodontics, comprehensive orthodontics, mixed dentition, adolescent dentition, adult dentition, right? So you're probably on the lines of between 10 and 15 different codes, CDT wise, right? Is that about correct?
Mm-hmm. Even less. I think we're probably around no more than 10, less than 10. Okay. So we keep it very streamlined in that sense.
And so with that few codes, I would imagine that your overhead, so far as your supplies go and your lab fees go, are insanely low. Tell us a little bit about what your overhead looks like in this model. And I'm going to call your model because it doesn't exist yet. And I'm going to take the arrogant approach of being the first to name it. I'm going to call it the GP specialist model, because you really are a GP and you've limited your practice to a specialty practice. You do have some specialists working for you. However, you really are limiting to a specialist niche, right?
Right.
So we're going to call this the GP specialty model, because that works on a couple of levels for both implants, TMD guys, sleep apnea guys, and you, as an entirely new entrant into the field, the GP orthodontist specialist model. So talk to me a little bit about what your overhead looks like and what your lab fees look like.
I mean, because we are limiting our supplies to just a few things, very little purchasing of anesthetics, really just composites, acid edge, kind of bonds, the basic restorative needs. That's what we need. And so we don't really have high turnover. Yeah, very few burrs, white stones here and there. So our overhead is low. Our biggest really purchase is actually disposables. We just, gloves, masks, candy wipes, whatnot.
So what
and
do you
that's
got?
Pretty much not very high.
What do you got in your overhead down to on disposables and lab fees?
I mean, we make sure, so we have, we buy everything in bulk. So this way we do have a higher, a higher discount on our equipment and supplies. And we are cautious on making sure that our team does not necessarily just wear one glove, toss it away, wear a mask, toss it away. So be completely cognizant of where they're using their supplies and how they're spending their supplies or using their supplies. So we do keep that control. We order once
Louis,
a month.
I'm gonna take a wild guess and say you don't know the specific number right now.
The specific number, it depends, because on average, let's say each purchase we get is maybe like 300 a month, maybe, or depends on disposables. I mean, if you throw in composites, it's different.
Okay. Let's take a step back and say, how many case starts are you doing orthodontically every month?
When we first started in March, it was slow. It started up, and
what are you doing right now? What are you doing right now?
Now, so this, as of, let's see, was it which month was it that we did the best? And maybe I think it was October, November. We had a case. We probably closed 30 cases in 1 month. On average, we probably closed 15 to 20.
Okay, excellent. So let's call 15 to 20 your average. Okay, 15 to 20 cases a month. What is the average fee And I'm assuming we're talking about comprehensive cases, because if you're limiting yourself to ortho, you're probably limiting yourself mostly to comprehensive cases, right? So what is your fee? What a ballpark? You obviously you can't disclose your exact fee. What is your fee ballpark?
So our fee is transparent on our website. We stick to it as our commitment to our patients. It's $4,800 for comprehensive.
I charge twice.
Unlimited refinement.
Well, not quite that. I charge $7,500 per comprehensive case. So you guys have got pretty good. You guys have got a pretty good price point there. So I print my own cases, and so my sunk case cost is less than $1,000 per case. What are you guys getting? Because you're doing a lot of volume, right? So what does your case cost look like with Invisalign?
With volume, of course, you get the discount. So we are at platinum, double, almost the black, the diamond. I think I've got the
Louis,
tier.
Pinky, you ready? Pinky, now say it with me. Black diamond.
Black diamond.
Black diamond.
Black diamond. So we're in that range, and so you can see our
you get a really huge
market.
Shit ton of discounts on your prices versus the average Invisalign provider. So you guys are looking at probably $1,100 and lower for a comprehensive case. Is that correct?
Depending on the scale. So I think every month, every quarter, it's getting lower because of the number of case starts that we have. So approximately what black diamond's pricing lab fee is, that's kind of where we are.
Excellent. So yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Louis, you're hard to pin down, man. Okay, so $1,100 case fees. I can get you lower than that, right? We'll talk.
We're working on it.
We'll talk.
We're trying to work on it. Yeah.
So anyway, so you guys are doing a great job there. You got $1,100 fee. You're charging how much again? $4,800. So you've got $3,700 of profit coming in per case, minus each visit, right? And so I'm assuming you're going to front load all of your IPR and all of your attachments. Is that correct? That's what most of the smart providers do. Is they front load all that stuff. Guys, for you out there who are doing Invisalign and are just losing your butts doing it, here's a tip. Front load your IPR. Tell the technicians you want to do all the IPR first or second visit, and then you don't have to see your patient for 3 or 4 visits in between. And so, Louis, how often are you seeing your patients? How many trays are they going through before they sit their butt in your seat?
Well, we try to see them after a month after they're bonding, just to see where things are.
Okay, so basically 4 weeks.
Yeah, 4 weeks, and then we come back after.
Half as often as the normal GP dentist is seeing. They're seeing them every 2 weeks. That's smart. Yeah. It's less chair time. Mm-hmm. So whenever you're looking at your outcomes, you guys have been doing this for how long?
Not a year, not even a year. We're at in March. Will be in our first year. So basically your limiteds, you're just about to finish up some of your limiteds, or maybe you have finished up some of your minor cases at this point. Are you finding a high patient satisfaction? Are you finding that you get a lot of patient referrals? We do get a high patient satisfaction rating from our, just by referral reviews. We do get referrals as well from patients because of just kind of the way we design our practice. It's a little different from the standard traditional model, which is, ours is on a retail ground floor space in the city. So it makes things a little different from the, traditional model as to, going to an elevator to get up to the top of the building to see a dentist.
Right. So you are getting a lot of patient referrals rather than advertising referrals. Because you said you don't really do much advertising, right?
And it's tough. It's a catch-22. You do have to front load a little bit more in advertising to get the initial and influx of patients. And sometimes with that, we get patient referrals and we get patients from advertising as well. But we haven't focused so much on advertising because we are front-facing.
Okay, fantastic. So, Louis, we've been on the air for about 36 minutes. And now I'm going to ask you to just give kind of an overview of your business model without me interrupting, front to finish, if you had to explain it to someone so that they could do it themselves. And there's the detriment of coming on this podcast, because now you have to explain your secret sauce, or at least most of it. So, well, we both know you're a badass and no one's going to replicate you, right? So, Louis, give me your top-down explanation of what it is you do, why it's special, what makes it different, and what makes it successful.
Yeah. So, Beam Street, it's a unique model. We are trying to target those who, at least from where we are positioned in New York City, we are able to target the patients around us more directly than most other practices in other geographic locations. And so we are utilizing that opportunity to, make sure that our patients are healthier, because, in New York City, most people do not know that they do have some sort of orthodontic coverage. So we do a service for them by, having patients get a consult, and we have them go to the hygiene as well to make sure we take their x-rays if there's any things that we might need to refer out. So the thing about our model is that we actually refer anything that's restorative out to our, trusted doctors in our network, because our model is not to do dentistry in-house. We don't do fillings, we don't do veneers, we don't do surgery. It's clear liners. You come in, anything that we see that's obvious, we refer out to a trusted doctor, and they get that lead. So naturally, we are providing them as we serve as a marketing resource to them as well. Rarely do we get patients from referring doctors, because I think a lot of doctors are able to do clear liners themselves. But, for us, we want to make sure that we're not greedy here. We're a giving business model. We're giving business. Why is it successful? I think that success is relative. I think it's still a work in progress. I think once we can understand our data a little bit more, because we're not at the year mark, we're at the 10th month mark. It's still hard to assess whether or not we're successful, because there are months that are great months, and there are months that are the worst months, and we're just trying to ride the wave to kind of see the migration of our patients, right? Because in New York City, summertime, everyone just leaves, and fall hits, everyone comes back in. So we're just trying to see what, where the pattern of movements for our patients to when we hit the first year mark or more. So I think success is relative, but it makes us unique because we are on the ground floor storefront space. And, the doors are, glass, you can see right through it. There's nice graphics, beautiful graphics, it's beautiful space, which makes us unique in the metropolitan area. And I'm not so sure how it is in other locations because of payroll, the overhead, because New York City overhead for rent is very high. Not everyone's willing to cough that up, right? So that's where we are.
So, Louis, have you thought about franchising this model? Once you've got the systems down and you know how it works, you know how to advertise, you know how to run the practice, and you know how to throw the levers, making big changes, and turn the dials, making small changes. Have you thought about franchising?
That's something that my partners and I have not yet fully decided on. I think it's a conversation we had when we initially started to see whether or not it would work. It is still to be decided, since it is still a work in progress until we find out that's a systematic way of delivering our treatments and our services. We're getting a little more clarity now than we ever did before, because with time comes wisdom, and we do see a little bit more, more predictable pattern of in our patients. So we're not so sure whether or not it's the right time, or whether or not franchising is something that we're looking into, because there are franchising fees, and that can be pretty high too. And it gets a little tricky with each state because each state law is very different too.
Absolutely.
So that gets a little tricky because that kind of puts a limitation on where you can
So, Louis,
flourish.
the short answer is yes, we have, but we're not sure how to do it yet.
Essentially.
So there's an old saying, and it says that success comes from wisdom, and wisdom comes from failure.
Right.
So I wish you much success, my friend, and I wish you very little wisdom.
Thank you. I wish the same as well. I think the wisdom comes from more green and reds. that's kind of where we are.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the Dear Doc podcast. Again, this is our second episode in this mini series of different business models and how they work for different people. Our goal is to show people that there's more than one way to skin a cat. There's more than one way to run a dental business. And I hope you've learned something today. If not something to do, then something not to do.
Right.
You guys have a fantastic day. And Louis, thank you so much for sharing your time with us and
Of course.
And your wisdom, of course.
I'm happy to, since there have been talks about, our model, there have been a lot of people who have been supportive and actually want to take this to their practices and in fact start new ones. So that gives us a lot of hope to see that that we're making a difference. And I think that by taking back, the markets by targeting, our consumers in a more direct way, we would be able to take back, bring back the quality of clear aligner markets. So,
Louis, one last thing I'll ask of you. As you sit here, you are 11 months into your new startup and things are going well. At this point, you've learned some things. And if you could boil them down into a simple one-sentence statement, that if you could go back and tell anyone graduating dental school right now, your best advice for being successful, even if it's not in the aligner field, what would it be?
Pursue your passion with conviction, because this is something that I firmly believe that was gonna work because it doesn't exist. It sometimes just needs to break the ice a couple times and just, it's gonna make people uncomfortable. But I think with that level of discomfort, it comes a little bit of clarity. And I've gotten a lot more clarity over the months when, from naysayers and the people who are supportive. So I do get both sides of the story, and it's, with pursuing your passion is not going to be easy. It's not going to be it's rainbows and sunshine. It's everything but that. There's a lot. It's pretty much a storm, and you sometimes don't know when the storm's going to fade. But you just keep your head up high, and that's part of pursuing your passion. It's not going to come easy. It takes time. Come hell or high water, right? So.
Absolutely. All right, my friend. Good night, folks.
Good night.
Thank you for joining us. This is Dr. Christopher Huffpower with the Dear Doc podcast and my special guest, Louis.
Thank you. Appreciate it for having me, and we'll see you guys soon.
Thanks for listening to the Dear Doc podcast, your source for the business and legal questions associated with your dental practice. Don't forget to subscribe to the Dear Doc podcast on all major platforms.